if you're in a job right now that you really enjoy, you should be meeting cross-functionally just to get to know people and build relationships. You should be constantly auditing your priorities and see if you need to delegate, stop, continue, or, the work that you're doing. You should know what you want, what projects you want to work on in 2 years, not just in 6 months. So this mentality around our career I think it needs to be a little bit more consistent than just, oh no, I'm unhappy, what now? And one of the greatest mistakes people can make is and I start working with individuals that want to get a promotion. The reason why they're unhappy now is because they waited until they wanted the promotion to ask for the promotion. Promotions take anywhere from 3 to 12 months to put into place. I'd say 3 months is giving yourself, that's a dream world. And so if you wait until you're unhappy, you are going to be unhappy for a while.
Right.
And so we kind of almost have to get ahead of that.
Yeah. And the other point that I think is also important to reinforce is if you're unhappy, now you're looking for a new role while you're unhappy. So you're going to carry some of that energy into that process versus being really happy. And then now you're looking for something and it's like, oh, wow, yeah, look, this person, they're great. They bring great energy versus someone who's a little bit resentful perhaps, or, that, and you run the risk that carries into the process. Today on the Workplace Therapist Show, we're going to take on a topic that really applies to all of us, everyone listening to this today, and really applies to us throughout our careers. And it is simply that word, careers. How can we more proactively manage our careers? And so to guide us on this conversation, I've got Dr. Benjamin Ritter. Dr. Benjamin Ritter, he is an expert in this space. He is a leadership and career coach. He has spoken to countless organizations on this and coaches individuals on this. He's a podcaster, author. He's done so many things around this space. So our conversation is really going to be anchored around what can we do to proactively manage our careers, both during a hot job market like it is today, but also maybe markets that aren't so hot. And we're also going to pivot a little bit, and you'll notice a pivot in the conversation where we're going to talk about how do we keep our people who maybe could be looking, which many people are right now. How do we keep them engaged, keep them staying, and be the best manager and leader that we can be? So listen real close. As I always do, I take lots of notes. I hope you do too. And at the end of the show, I will share with you some of the highlights that really stood out for me. Well, Ben, I am so excited to have you on the show today. And I'm so excited for our topic today. I love this idea of proactively managing your career. I think that proactive career management idea is so important because so often we just wait for the winds of change to come along and sweep us away. And then we say, oh my gosh, I got to find a new job, or oh my gosh, I got to do something, versus really laying a foundation that we can build off of. And I'm so glad to have you on as kind of an expert in this space. So before we dive into this topic and learn from you on some of the things you're seeing today and advice you're giving folks, I would love to hear a little bit more about your story. What got you doing this in the first place?
Well, I've had, I think, an interesting perspective on what a career is. And I, can thank kind of my upbringing a bit for that and what I decided to focus on for my career initially. But before I dive into all that, thank you so much for having me. So it's a ton of fun to be here. And I'm looking forward to diving into this topic and also getting some of your perspectives on it and your personal experiences. I'd love for this to be a conversation.
Beautiful.
So when I was younger, my dad was an entrepreneur and also kind of stay at home. So I'd go with him to fix homes. We would be in basements, like with sub pumps, clean. We did a bunch of really dirty jobs as well as just like normal, install jobs and roofing jobs and such. And I can remember how he would like kind of forget to eat sometimes, and he would just like odd hours, and you could see that he had these really great relationships with his clients. And so for me, work became when you want to work, and you worked hard and you cared about your work, and it was something that you did with your hands and it was fun. And then fast forward, I ended up falling into soccer and falling in love with soccer actually, and decided that was something that I wanted to at least believe was my purpose. And so dedicated my life to something that also wasn't a 9 to 5 pursuit. And so now the two of the largest influences on what I believed was a career have nothing to do with sitting behind a desk.
Yeah.
And I think that foundation has been really critical into why I do what I do today. And we'll get to that later. But now fast forward to the fact that I ended up in healthcare. I worked in healthcare for 6 years, but I fell into that job after basically getting turned down from jobs that I really wanted for 2.5 years. And so I actually got a job 4 different times that I was really passionate about, signed it on the dotted line, and the next day the job was canceled within 3 days.
What?
It happened with the CDC. It happened with the Illinois Department of Public Health. I was really focused on trying to change the world through health policy. That's kind of where my career ended up. And so now I'm in healthcare, working a position that I didn't feel like I chose, that I felt like I had to take because I was just sick of working. I was working at I was bartending. I was working odd jobs, handing out flyers on street corners. I was trying to build a business on the side that I kind of fell into. So nothing in my career really kind of was something that I was like, this is what I really want to do with my time and energy. But I was spending, 60 to 8 hours a week doing all these things with my time and energy. That equation, if you fast forward a couple of years, doesn't lead to a lot of positive feelings, especially if you keep that mindset of, I didn't choose this. I don't want to be here. Whenever you have one foot out the door and one foot in, you're looking for an escape, looking for reasons to leave. Everything that you see, everything that you think, everything that you do is through this filter of, I don't want to be here. How can I get out? You're looking for reasons why you want to get out. So that led to resentment towards my employer. It led to, a negative perception and filter around the work that I was doing, even though I was doing a lot of good. I was working at a hospital system. I was improving patient outcomes. It made me go into work, but trying not to work. So, okay, how can I not work today? I'm going to go escape and go to the gym. I'm going to read an article on something that I care about. I'm going to just kind of walk around. And I realized after a while that negative kind of aura that I was going into work each and every single day was seeping into other areas of my life, my personal relationships, how I felt about myself. And so basically I was wasting my time, wasting my life, and wasting my career. Luckily, I was walking to work one day, and this was actually a really good job. I could walk to work before remote work was a really big thing. And I was looking around, feeling like the weight of the world was on my shoulders, dreading the fact that I had to go into work today, plotting how I was going to leave work to go to the gym later. And I looked around and I looked at other people in the eyes, and I was like, wow. And I started noticing that everyone seems to feel the same way, had this kind of dread, this sunken look on their face, almost like they were walking, as zombies into their corporate careers. And it made me really sad. Like not just for myself, but for the people around me and for what we were doing with our lives and work. And at the time, like that side business was basically a life coach. I was in dating and relationships, and I was this expert in personal development that got headhunted to go work for this company for a bit, and then broke off and worked for myself and was writing articles on these topics. But for some reason, it never hit me that I wasn't focusing on development in my career. I almost gave up. Like after all those experiences with not getting the job that I wanted, with not buying into the corporate lifestyle, with now being in it, it almost was like I was defeated. And so luckily at that point in time, I woke up and I was like, oh shoot, I got to do something about this. I can actually take control. I don't have to be the person that was knocked down a bunch of times and then didn't get back up, despite being pretty successful in my career, ending up being an executive in healthcare. But so that wake up moment, that little light bulb made me stop and say, what do I care about? Where do I want to spend my time? What challenges do I want to face? What am I passionate about? And let's start strategizing just like I do in every other area of my life to get there. And so I'll pause because that was kind of a big turning point for me.
Yeah.
And I actually realized just a couple of days ago that, so I was an executive in healthcare with no experience in talent development or leadership. I had some self-taught, experiences with coaching. In 2015, I decided to go back and get my doctorate. It's now 2022. And it's been like, I'll just put a little ego on for a second. I'm a thought leader in the space. I get sought out by organizations. I get, paid by some of the biggest names that you would see in the market. And it's like, okay, wow, that happened in, yes, that's 7 years later. I left healthcare in 2018, but that's I just kind of gave myself a pat on the back for a second. And sometimes when I work with individuals in career development, they're like, oh, but I want to do this in 3 months. And so, hold on a second. Your career is much longer than 3 months. All right. So I'll stop there and kind of turn it over to you, because we didn't get into what I'm doing now, but I think that milestone is pretty important.
So I'm really curious in your story. So you had this moment, you had this realization, you're looking around at other folks. They all seem sad. There's this look of dread on their face. You're feeling that same kind of feeling for you. That created that more global sadness. And you said, wow, I really want to change this. And then we kind of fast forwarded to, you get your doctorate, and now, the story's got a really good ending or a good beginning, however we want to frame that. But I'm curious, what was the first step? Because it sounds like that was an important one and probably took a lot of courage and faith.
When you start to pay attention, things start making sense. And so instead of looking for a way out, I actually took my focus and put it on where I was. And that focus led me to realize, okay, so what do I really like? What energizes me? Well, I love helping people. I help people develop and grow. I don't buy into like rules that don't make sense. And coaching has been a way that I've made some side money at the time. And as a leader in an environment where people thought of me as a high achiever, as a high performer, as the person that's going to keep growing in the organization, even though I wasn't doing much, at least from my perspective. So and at the same time, people were coming to me with their own problems and with leadership. And I was complaining about my problems with leadership and where I was. I was like, okay, so this is what I care about. I don't want people to feel like me. I don't want people to to experience work like this. It should not be how every day is. And that insight, combined with a lot of my other strengths and passions that I cared about, and which, by the way, at that time, I was selected for an executive emerging leaders program. And so I was meeting with our chief people person, who was in charge of all of our development and coaching programs throughout the 13 hospital sites that we were part of. It was almost like this serendipitous moment that I needed all those little influencing factors to have happened in my life to wake me up around where I wanted to focus. Or you could say I had little moments of sparks that highlighted where I needed to invest more of my time. Because if we rewound a little bit, the way that I got into coaching was someone stopped me when I was being social and, I went out by myself to be uncomfortable in certain social situations. They stopped me and said, you need to meet my boss. So brought me in to meet his boss and hired me to run his kind of men's programs. But then prior to that, I ended up, through networking, trying to find a full-time job when I was trying to figure out what to do with this career of mine. I networked into our kind of our alumni board for the graduate school I was a part of. And there was a federal coaching program through the maternal, child, and public health through the federal government. They were giving away free life coaching to public health professionals to try to inspire them to be more better public health professionals. I applied and ended up receiving a grant for 6 months of coaching. So I look at these milestones and pillars in my life, but I had to sit down and focus on what I wanted to create to be able to realize those and to tie them all together.
Yeah.
Without me taking my focus from victimhood and reframing it to be more of, okay, I want to be proactive right now with my career and my life and do something that I enjoy and that fulfills me. Without that shift, I wouldn't have been able to notice those moments.
That's great. So now if we fast forward to today, and you're kind of working with folks and they're trying to navigate some of the same challenges you went through, what are some of the common requests, needs, goals that folks are bringing you?
A lot of people are looking for permission to change. They're afraid of losing what they have, even if what they have isn't really good enough for them. And due to other experiences in their career, they don't feel that the opportunities are out there. They don't feel like they can actually get what they want. We can rewind that and say, well, they don't even know what they want because they have throughout their career said yes to opportunities that came from whatever they did before. And I'd say this is a pretty fair generalization that people go to school, for maybe a degree. Some people, maybe they don't, maybe they, whatever. They end up getting their first job for whatever reason. That first job tends to organically be the reason why they get all the other jobs in their career.
That's right.
As well as the relationships that they have. And it is rare for someone to say, what is it that I really want to do? What organization do I really want to work for? What values do I want in the organizations I want to work for? What type of skills do I want to learn next? It's more often that, okay, friends, is anyone hiring? Company, can I be promoted? Job board, I'm just going to apply to these jobs because they seem rather interesting. So it's almost like they're rolling the dice in every decision of their career, where the decisions that were made prior to that are dictating also the decisions they make after that. And they really are giving their power and their control away to what they are going to do for the majority of their day and for their life. And so that is probably the biggest issue that I see with a lot of people that come to me.
Yeah. I love that. I'll make the story short, but this was years ago when I was getting my MBA, and I remember I was doing a networking event, which I really don't like to do. People who listen to the show know that I'm much more of an introvert. Networking events are extremely painful for me. And I'm talking to this consultant, and he introduces himself to me as the pricing specialist for the tire industry. But he didn't say it like, hey, I'm the pricing specialist for the tire industry. And by the way, not a pricing specialist, the pricing specialist for the tire industry. But the way he said to me was almost this moment of awareness, like it just hit him. He reached out his hand and he said, I'm the pricing specialist for the tire industry. Like, how the heck did I get here? And he had this story, just like you were saying, he'd worked in banking a little bit after undergrad, didn't like it, went back and got an MBA, thought, I'll go into consulting. It'll be like a workplace buffet, and I'll get to try little things on the buffet, which it can be. But the first time you go through the buffet and as a consultant, you get whatever's left over because they just kind of assign you something, right? You're the junior person. And of course, he got tires, and he was great. And so the client wanted a follow-on engagement with him on it. And then 15 years later, he's the pricing specialist for the tire industry. So as you were telling us that kind of that pattern, made me immediately think of my tire pricing friend I bumped into some years ago. So when people come to you with these challenges and they are seeking permission, they're afraid they're not going to get what they want. They don't know what they want. Where do you start? What are some of the starting places that you help them unlock that position?
Well, I'm not sure when people are going to hear this, and it's, I'm sure it's evergreen, so it'll be for a while. But for our listeners, we're in the middle, potentially the middle. Some people think the end, but I'd say probably the middle of the Great Resignation, or some people coin it the Great Reshuffle. And it is a quitter's market. It is a candidate's market, which really lends some special, gives some special powers to people that are looking for a job right now, as well as it creates this atmosphere within, I think, the world. And I know you mentioned about being an introvert, but one-on-one conversations tend to be pretty okay for introverts. It's where people are wanting to have conversations with people, to build their network, to learn more, and to potentially create opportunities for themselves or to fill opportunities that they have. So it is right now is one of the best times to try to actually start building relationships around the values and the potential career that you want for yourself. But before we get into outreach, a lot of people that come to me are still a little unsure about what they want, because you would think if they knew what they wanted, they could then, and they were confident what they wanted, they would then take action towards it. So a lot of inaction doesn't actually come from, the fear that kind of I mentioned, or like it comes from the lack of clarity around who I am, what I stand for, and what I believe in and what I want. And so the first thing that we tend to do when I'm working with professionals that want to make a switch, is really dive into their vision that they have for their professional life. And not many people sit down and say, this is what I want to be doing in 5 years. Now, you may not be doing that, because if I looked back 5 years in the past, I wouldn't tell you that I'll be where I was at today, or 10 years, not even close. But I can start hinting at the type of lifestyle that I want. I can get close to the types of values and things that I might want to be doing with my time or the impact that I want to have. And that vision is really important to then to then pull out those core values and then say, okay, so what goals could you accomplish in your career? What roles, what organizations would be a conduit for these values, for the things that you care about? Because then we can start building a list where they could focus. And not just that, we also can create kind of a little bit of a bio, an elevator speech for them to become more memorable to the people that they're meeting, to ensure that the opportunities that they want are going to be brought towards them instead of them having to always seek them out. So that clarity would be the first piece. And then when someone actually knows what they stand for, what they care about, where they want to go, and you can break that down even further to what types of things do you like doing at work, what energizes you, what de-energizes you, what type of skills do you want to learn, in terms of vertical and horizontal growth, then that becomes confidence. That level of clarity automatically just starts transforming into confidence. And that confidence with, I guess, some skill learning, like, for example, I wanted to be an executive and leadership coach and work in this industry. I needed to go learn. Getting my doctorate brought me more confidence, right? Studying academic journals for hours a day, doing my own research. But when you have clarity and when you have confidence, that leads to action. And so if we hold ourselves accountable and we're intentional, we then can actually start controlling more of where we invest our time. Right? People tend to invest their time in things that don't matter because they don't know what they think matters and they don't believe they can actually accomplish it. And so that's really how I work with clients when it comes to their career. And we can get into, well, how does that translate to getting a job? We can totally talk about that. But I think the core pillars there are really important.
Yeah, beautiful. I love the way you said that clarity plus confidence leads to action. I think that's so cool. Nice, simple way, but so kind of profound. So yeah, I actually am curious. So once they have that clarity and confidence and it leads to action, what does that action look like? What are, particularly right now, as you said, we are sitting in this great resignation, and I like what you said, probably somewhere in the middle-ish of this, because all the folks that I'm talking to, all the different clients and organizations, they all say the same thing to me. Where is everybody? Where are the people? We got this unemployment rate that is 3.7 right now. Right before the pandemic, it was 3.6. So it will look normalized, but there's a whole lot of folks that have left the marketplace. And so it's really creating this, as you said, kind of a quitter's market. And so if we want to take advantage of that, in a minute, I'm going to ask you, how do we keep our folks? But let's say you're an individual and you want to make some shifts. How do you start? Where's the starting place once you've got that clarity and that confidence?
Yeah. So you know what you want and you feel that you can get it. Well, what people tend to do is they go to a job board, they open up a job board and they apply to jobs, or they go to their current network and they ask them for opportunities. It's not being very proactive. It may feel proactive, but it's not, because if you know what you want and you feel confident of getting there, why not make an actual decision for the types of organizations that you want to target or that you want to start learning about? So instead of going into, I want a job here, we can do a step before that and say, are these places that really deserve me? Are these places that are going to make sense for me? And you can do that by, the only way to really do that is to talk to people at the organizations. So I was going to, say you can apply for jobs. It's fine. It's good to apply for jobs online. But really the goal when in your career search, if you're saying, where should I even start, would be to have conversations with people that work at organizations that you're slightly interested in, that are either potentially going to be your boss, so a step above you, or in a cross-functional position, so they'd work with you. And that will give you, as you approach these conversations with curiosity, give you more information about what it would be like working there, and build relationships with people that are at the organization that could potentially help your career at that point or in the future. Now, the greatest mistake people make is they just apply for jobs, or they message people in HR at an organization that they're interested in with hey, I want this job. Is that possible? And what that does is it basically takes that step and says, I want to take something now instead of learn something. And so before you even have the reasons why you want to be there. You're trying to already be there. And, there's a lot to be said just in terms of that strategy where applying for jobs with your resume is like throwing it into a black hole every single time. You're not actually creating any value. If you're reaching out to HR or you're reaching out to anyone and asking for a job, you're giving them a reason to say no, which is most people don't think they can get you a job even if they can. So you're approaching this strategically in a way of, I'm not going to give someone a reason to say no. I'm going to give them reasons to say yes. And so when I'm reaching out to individuals at organizations that I want to actually work at and learn about and potentially learn about, I'm reaching out in a way that's just through curiosity of, I want to learn about your career. I want to learn how you got to where you are because I think I might want to get to where you are. And I want to learn about what it's like being at the organization that you're at. And if you're able to represent your own values and your own vision for your career because you did that work in clarity and you're confident, usually by the end of that conversation, that person is motivated because your values align. That person feels connected to you and trusts you a little bit. And so usually they'll say, have you thought about working here? Or they'll say, let me put you in touch with XYZ person because it seems like it'd be a good fit for you. And so that change in strategy from, I know where I just want a job to, I want to build relationships and learn about the job market is magical. And with every single one of my clients, I'd say every single one, actually probably 98%, not every single one, has gotten a job through those types of conversations in jobs that didn't even exist, jobs that actually aligned with their dream goals for their positions, where they would end up on a marketing call. So I remember this one guy, he was working as a creative director and he took some time to get him a little bit more confident about where he wanted to go with his career, that it was possible. And to get him to start, sending out these messages and these opportunities to connect and to learn. On his fourth phone call, he ended up speaking with someone at an organization that was planning to do his dream job, like was planning to create an opportunity for have his dream job, but he didn't have the person to run it. And so through conversation, he's like, it was almost like that person felt that it was magic because this person showed up that wanted to do exactly what he wanted to create. And so he was able to then submit him into the budget and the proposal. And now he's launched basically this dream school that he's always wanted, at this dream agency that now he's a part of.
How cool.
Just because he decided to send out a random LinkedIn message and jump on a phone call with knowing what he wanted.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. So in a minute, I want to pivot to talk about how do we keep our folks from leaving, because that's also important. You got managers listening to this that say, this sounds great. I'm looking for something new, but they might also say, I'm actually comfortable where I'm at, but I don't want my folks to leave. But before we do that, one last question around this. So we're in a seller's market, buyer's market, quitter's market, however we want to frame that. We're in a market for candidates. If you're a candidate, you can get lots of great opportunities. It's not always going to be that way. This is cyclical, like everything in life. I remember having a friend of mine. He was an executive coach for many, many years. And he said, his least favorite executive coaching clients were the ones that, he'd place them somewhere and then they would just disappear. He'd never hear anything from them again until they got laid off or something happened. And then they would reach out to him again like they were best friends. But they didn't nurture that relationship. So what are some strategies to keep these relationships warm and nurtured when you are happy with where you're at or when the market isn't so great?
You should always be crafting your job to be aligned with what you want to achieve in your career. And I don't know anyone that's in a job right now that couldn't do something to improve it or couldn't be a little bit more aware of how they're working and why they work to ensure that they're actually leading towards a future career that they want. And so the fact that people just kind of disappear, that's where I'd say they're missing out the most, because the greatest opportunity you have in your career is actually when you're happy in it, because that means that you have great relationships, you're doing work that you enjoy. So now it's okay. So what's next? What should I be working towards instead of just what am I working on? And that can be with a coach. It can be with the relationship that you have with your boss. It could be a skip level relationship. So your boss's boss. You should, if you're in a job right now that you really enjoy, you should be meeting cross-functionally just to get to know people and build relationships. You should be constantly auditing your priorities and see if you need to delegate, stop, continue, or, the work that you're doing. You should know what projects you want to work on in 2 years, not just in 6 months. So this mentality around our career I think it needs to be a little bit more consistent than just, oh no, I'm unhappy. What now? And one of the greatest mistakes people can make is that I start working with individuals that want to get a promotion. The reason why they're unhappy now is because they waited until they wanted the promotion to ask for the promotion. Promotions take anywhere from 3 to 12 months to put into place. I'd say 3 months is giving yourself, that's a dream world. And so if you wait until you're unhappy, you are going to be unhappy for a while.
Right.
And so we kind of almost have to get ahead of that.
Yeah. And the other point that I think is also important to reinforce is if you're unhappy, now you're looking for a new role while you're unhappy. So you're going to carry some of that energy into that process versus being really happy. And then now you're looking for something and it's like, oh, wow, yeah, look, this person, they're great. They bring great energy versus someone who's a little bit resentful perhaps, or, that, and you run the risk that carries into the process.
And if you're looking for a job though, too, it's going to take you 3 to 6 months.
Right.
So you're resetting expectations for people. What people tend to get disappointed. They start networking and they start sending messages out and their response rate is, 20, 30%, and they get discouraged. Or I was talking with a client that just started the other day and he's like, I don't really believe in networking. I don't really believe in reaching out on LinkedIn. Well, tell me why. He's like, I sent 4 messages and 2 people replied, but 2 people didn't reply to me. And I go, okay, let's talk about your expectations for a second.
That's a pretty good response rate if you ask me.
Yeah, people don't feel that way. If they're doing something that they're uncomfortable with, they don't do very often, they think there should be 100% success rate instead of realizing that you want to get no's because you'll be wasting your time if you're talking to everybody. You want to talk to the people that want to talk to you. But and so we have to get ahead of it. We have to get ahead of it, or else we're going to be sitting in our discomfort for a while. And that's why a lot of times when I work with clients, it's not just where you want to go, it's how do we fix where you're at? Because they're going to be there for a bit. And so if you're looking for another job, it's probably because you have some boundary issues right now at your current job. And probably because you haven't actually started focusing on what you wanted to create where you're at. You think what you can get is what you want to create, where you actually can usually create it where you're at currently at your job.
Wow, that's a great way to frame it. So for the last part of our conversation, let's flip roles a little bit. We're now that manager, and we're really nervous. We've got 5 people on our team normally. We're down to 4. We really don't want to lose these 4 because once you lose these 4, now the team's going to likely turn into kind of a, the opposite of a virtuous cycle, or we're going to go downhill because now then those 3 people are carrying the load, then you lose another person, and then now you're rebuilding and you've got a real problem. How do we keep our people? How can we create environments that promote this sense of career growth and everything that you're talking about, with our own teams?
It's a wonderful question. And actually, there's a really interesting statistic I saw the other day called the tsunami of the Great Recession. It's that 50% of people that are around someone that leaves a job starts questioning if their job is right for them. And so if someone has left your team, if you're down to 3, those people are wondering if they can get paid better somewhere else. They're wondering if they should leave. They're now worried about that workload that's going to have to get distributed. And so it's a moment of fear. It's a moment where you shake things up. People actually are all shook up. And so one of the best things you can do in those situations is to start communicating with your team. And that it sounds so simple, but one of the most effective ways of engaging and retaining your associates or your employees is one-on-ones, regular weekly one-on-ones. And it's not just, hey, let's just have a status update on what you're working on. It's how you feeling this week? How can I help you this week? How can I support you? What struggles are you facing? What do you want to create in your career? How can I help you get there? And so you are building a relationship with your team to ensure that they communicate with you when they are feeling like they want to leave. And it's kind of similar to a stay interview. You go to people that are in your organization right now and you ask them questions like, why are you still here? And it's,
Yeah.
you really learn the reasons why that your organization keeps them. And through these conversations, if people know that they have this time and space to share this with you, and they're not going to be judged and they're going to be supported, that can build the relationships you need and help you also preempt, like kind of get ahead of any situations that may lead to someone leaving your organization. I was working with an executive the other day, and he shared with me how he's really enjoying his one-on-ones, and how one of his senior executives came into the office and said that they're really overwhelmed with work. And he was really proud that he felt comfortable saying that. And so he's like, well, take the time that you need, take some time off if you need to. I totally understand it. And I stopped him for a second and I said, okay, so did you coach him through his workload? And he's like, what do you mean? And you go, well, did you see where he was prioritizing his work? Did you ask him what work was actually causing him to be exhausted? Did you try to problem solve and see where you could help add greater support, where the struggles are? Maybe there's an issue with resources, or maybe there's some conflict with the client. And he's like, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. I go, yeah. So not only are you creating a safe space to have these conversations, but you're also putting yourself in a coaching seat and trying to problem solve and support. And that can retain people. And now, if someone wants more money or they want more benefits, or, there's those types of things you need to learn about to either set the proper expectations or to help kind of spearhead how you can get that for them. Because if someone is really wanting a title change and you tell them, yeah, I hear you, but you don't actually tell them the steps you're taking to champion that, or don't help them be realistic in terms of like, okay, we can do this, but it's going to take 8 months. This is how we're going to help you get this work now within 3 months or 4 months. So it's really making sure that the person understands what you're doing and why things are the way they are, not just the fact that you're listening and you're there for them too.
I love that. I love all those things. I love the fact that you make the point of those one-on-ones is a great way to retain people. And I kind of put it into 3 buckets as I'm hearing you. First, it's the natural support bucket. Like, wow, what can I do to support you? What resources do you need? And even some conversations to help them unlock areas where they're stuck. I like the coaching bucket because that also is a way for them to grow and develop. You're actually helping them think differently about problems, and they're learning. So they now feel like, wow, I'm in a place I'm not only am I supported, I'm learning, I'm getting better, I'm getting smarter. And then you also mentioned this last one, it's kind of subtle, but when you were talking about making those commitments, I think follow through is an important point too. Because so often I've heard of managers, they kind of loosely promise a promotion and then it gets kicked out another year, and then now the employee says, I don't trust this person. They're making these promises, but they're empty promises. And I think if you make a promise and then you stick to it, even if it's 8 months, if you hold to 8 months and it comes to fruition, the employee's going to say, okay, got it. Like they followed through on that promise. And I think those are all good. And while people, go after, more money right now, I do think they've got to be really wary. If it's a lot more money, you've got to ask yourself, why are they paying me this much more money? It's not because I'm super pretty or handsome. Promise you that. It's probably because you're walking into something that's pretty much a mess. I'm down in the South and live in Atlanta. So we would say in the South, we'd say it's a hot mess. You're probably walking into a hot mess. I remember back in the MBA program that I both graduated from and then eventually taught in, they would the highest paying jobs coming out of those programs were always investment banking. But when you broke it down by hourly rate, the folks in marketing brand management actually made more per hour because the folks in investment banking were working 75, 80, 85, 90 hours a week, sleeping in their offices, not a good lifestyle. Make a lot of money, but by hourly rate, you're paying a big price for that. So I think you make some really, really great points. Ben, this has been an absolute pleasure. So I ask all my guests this question. What is one life hack you have for us on how we can have either better conversations or better relationships, either at work or at home?
So always dig a little bit deeper. Right? Every onion has layers. So if someone comes in and they want a promotion and you're a leader and you can't give them a promotion, your response isn't, I can't give you a promotion. Your response is, tell me more about that. What is it about this title that interests you? Is it the work? Is it the money? Is it the benefits? What is it specifically? And if you're able to have a little bit deeper of a conversation with your directs, or if you're an employee and you have a leader and you want feedback from them and they're not giving you feedback, start asking them questions about your work. So it's just the fact that don't take things at that top level. If you really want to grow in your career, you want to retain your employees, you have to dig deeper.
I love that. I think that's so important. That curiosity builds that relationship. And it also gives you so much more information on how you can help them. People feel heard and valued. And now you're like, okay, wow. Oh, now I get what they're looking for. Let me see if I can find that for them versus just assuming. That's great. Well, if people want to follow you, listen to your podcast, really, really just learn more about the great work you're doing and maybe even connect with you to work with you, where can they go?
And for sure, connect with me on LinkedIn. I post a ton on there, Dr. Benjamin Ritter. And then go to the website, liveforyourselfconsulting.com. There's links to two of the podcasts that I host, YouTube channel, media appearances. So this will be up there. And information on how to book a call to see if you're interested in coaching services.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you for all the great work you're doing, supporting all those folks out there in the world as they're trying to navigate this critical, important component of our lives, our career. And people like you that are doing this great work are really helping us have better lives. So I really, really value it and value you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you got as much out of that conversation as I did. At one point, Ben used the term evergreen, and I think that's a great way to describe this conversation. It was evergreen. While we can talk about it right now in The Great Resignation, everything he said are points that we can use at any point in our career. So a couple highlights that I took away from my conversation with Ben. First, he described right now, I like this term, he said it's a quitter's market or a candidate's market, but it's this idea that right now it's a hot market if you're looking to make moves. But so often people come to him, and many of us are probably feeling the same way. We don't know what we want. We're afraid we're not going to get what we want. So how do we unlock that? And he really had 3 steps for us. He said, first, you got to spend some time thinking about what is it you want? What are those things that charge you up, your strengths, your values, a lot of those classic things we know we need to be doing. The second thing he said is then you need to make sure that you're looking at places that really deserve you. I think that was a nice way to say it. How can we find places that are just going to be good fits for me? Not just pay me well, but good fits for me. And then third, he said we've got to always be nurturing those relationships and crafting our career, reaching out to people, connecting, being curious about them, building those relationships, not just reaching out to HR saying, I want a job. Those were all great points. And now we can pivot on to how do we keep our people? And he made it a really profound statement. He says a study came out recently and said that when someone leaves a job, 50% of their coworkers or former coworkers ask themselves, well, should I be leaving too? He said the best way to keep those folks, if you're the manager, regular one-on-ones. And in those regular one-on-ones, we need to be doing 3 things. First, asking how we can support them. Second, how we can coach them and improve how they're doing the work. And third, making sure that we're following through on our promises. So I thought he had some great tips for us, not only as managers, but as individuals, as we think about managing this messy thing that is careers and that blend of our workplaces today.